Singing Dutchman Productions. Hello and welcome to Doug's Front Porch, a podcast where I get to sit down with friends, old and new, and have honest conversations. Today I welcome Shan Packer onto the front porch, a friend, former colleague. We'll talk more about that here in a minute. Shan, welcome to the front porch.
Thanks for having me, Doug. I appreciate the opportunity to sit with Front Porch.
Yeah, how about it? I wish we were actually sitting on the front porch, but we're gonna have to sit. We're gonna have to just pretend and do this virtually for now.
Yeah, we can sit in your front porch this summer.
That sounds good. Okay, so Shan, I always start every episode off with giving the audience just a little bit of a chance to get to know the person a little bit more. So tell us, if you could please, where you grew up, or where you were born, where you grew up, and talk a little bit maybe about your childhood. Like, did you have brothers and sisters? What kind of things were you into as a kid?
I grew up in Orviston, Pennsylvania. Your local people will know where that is. For your listeners who have never been to Orviston, the best way to describe it's a small town. If you were to airlift Beaver Stadium and drop it into my little hollow where I lived, I doubt you would see a home. It would swallow up the entire town. It was a company town. Brickyard, General Refractories. I actually owned the town, every house. So there's a book out there. I think I may have left you read it once, Doug, called All Company Towns Ain't Bad by Jim Davey, who it makes a great description of what my early childhood was like. But the company owned all the houses. They had a company store. My father walked to work, walked back to the house, had no need for a car. Groceries sometimes would be delivered. It was a tight-knit community. Every summer we would whitewash the trees and the street lights for our annual festival. It was a very, very clean town. When my parents moved out of Orviston, we lived in what was called a block house, similar to apartments. Let's say we had 3 bedrooms, a living room, kitchen, yard, and a shed. And rent in the mid 1970s, when my parents moved out, was $24 a month. And then each of when the block house itself, there were 10 units in it, I believe 10. And the unit next to me, which is literally a brick wall, my wife lived in the unit next to me. So I can literally say I married the girl next door. And 46 years later, we're still married.
It's great, for people that don't know American history, maybe they've heard this concept of a company town before, but I think a lot of people maybe have this image as something that's way back in the past, but that's not necessarily the case. I mean, you're a living example that, company towns did exist into the mid to middle second half of the 20th century. Just so people kind of get a better feel, 'cause I think this is so interesting. You don't get to talk to somebody that grew up in one of these situations very often. So, like you said, the company, which was a brick factory, owned everything, and
They owned everything. So they owned the houses that the workers lived in. So the workers they got a salary, and out of that salary, they had to pay rent for their homes. So a bit socialistic, let's say, but again, it wasn't a bad thing. It was pretty neat. We knew each other. The lady next door to us, she'd bake bread, hand to heel the bread over, and then maybe give us a loaf. And everyone looked out for each other in that atmosphere. It was pretty cool. Baseball was big for those company towns. Monument had a team, Orviston had a team, Snowshoe had a team. If you people think Wrigley Field and Candlestick Park have these unique features to it, but our baseball field had literally a fenced-in garden in right center field, and if you hit a ball into that was a ground rule double. Our general store was in dead center field. It was all you could get off of that, and then we had a multi-level boarding house in left field that only legends were ever able to hit one on it or over that. We had a road that went through left field. Every once in a while, you'd have to stop a ball game to allow a car to go through. But baseball was king, uh, especially on let's say a Sunday. You'd set up on Laura Bell's bank, and with a picnic lunch, and maybe watch a doubleheader baseball game between a couple of local brickyards, and uh, it was pretty cool. It was a great upbringing.
It sounds almost like a Norman Rockwell painting to a certain extent, like this dreamlike America of that era. But I mean, the story does go on because I mean, you had already left at this point, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but eventually that factory went out of business or moved. And how did that affect then the town? If this factory, this brick factory, owned everything, and the factory closes up, what happened to the people that were living there?
They had the opportunity to buy the houses that they lived in. I don't remember. I think they may have sold for like $1,100, something like that, for a probably a 3-bedroom house, with the downstairs and the garage, things of that nature. We lived in the block house, and somebody bought the block house. We paid them rent. So the brickyard, don't quote me on the year. I want to say 1963, 64, something like that. It went out. And then people did need a car then, or some way to go to work. Most of them went to work at Champion Parts. Might have been called Marymount at the time, down in Beach Creek, or some various other places. My uncle Ham actually moved to Avonmore, Pennsylvania, with General Refractories, and took a brickyard job with them out. It's near the Pittsburgh area. So they had the opportunity.
If you live in the central Pennsylvania region where we are located, and you ever get the chance, I highly recommend a road trip out to Orviston. You literally go to the end of the road, back. You think you're never going to get there, and you think, where in God's name am I going? And then you get there, and all of a sudden there's this little town in the middle of the mountains. It truly is kind of like, almost has like this Brigadoon quality, where you're like, where am I? Is this like, have I traveled in time or something like that? But it's beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful out there, and it had to be somewhat of an idyllic childhood in that sense, like you talked about. It had to have
Yeah,
been.
one of the things too. I say that's where the blacktop begins. Some people think it ends in Orviston, but it actually begins there. You either took a loop around Orviston, which is about the size of a football field, and went back out the way you came, or you took the dirt roads out over the mountains several different ways to get to another hard road. It might take you to Renova or Snowshoe. But life there was good. It's centered on the ball field. We wiffle ball, baseball, pickup games, sled riding. Our festivals were held on the ball field. Church with an annex that we had basketball courts in, and it was some. I think it was pretty much idyllic. And I left there in '77, so I've been out of there for quite a while, but I still consider it my hometown. It is my hometown. A few of your listeners, and you may have been here, Doug. I was shooting archery one time in Snowshoe Mountain, West Virginia, and went for a road trip, my son and I, and drove down over this hill and ended up in Cass, West Virginia. And I thought I was back home in the 60s. All of these little white houses painted the same. A dilapidated brickyard was there. There was a train station there. There was tracks there, a small general store. And I have actually stayed in those houses. It just takes me back to the 1960s.
That's crazy. Well, I mentioned that Shan was a colleague of mine, and that's a long journey to get to that part of his life, and about that part of your life, Shan, I guess I should say. So, you've already told us about your childhood. You eventually become a teacher. Take us. It probably has a longer story, but if we can kind of like shorten it up a little bit, how did you get from high school graduate Shan to becoming a teacher?
It's a long road, and someone has to deal with what post-secondary education looks like. Most people, when they think of post-secondary education, they immediately think of the college route. That wasn't my route. Uh, Even while I was an educator, which I spent 15 years, and the last couple of years, I'm still dabbling in that to some degree. When people ask me what I do for a living, I say I'm a machinist. That's just what I am. That's what I've always been. 30 years of that, uh, actually. And then I spent 8,000 hours on an apprenticeship. got my journey workers paper in 1986. Uh, that opened up a lot of doors of opportunity. I went into some management roles with my company at the time, and then went back into machining itself, self-taught for computer numerical control equipment. I've never been to a formal school other than my apprenticeship training. And then 30 years of that, I'm on a golf course one day with my son-in-law. I get a call from my daughter. Hey, Keystone Central has a job they want you to apply for. And I'm like, or come in for an interview for. And I'm like, man, I never applied there. But I called, and and Sam Marullo, he says, yeah, we want you to come in for an interview. And I'm like, I didn't even apply. How did you get my name? And I had applied for some part-time work, nighttime teaching at CPI. It wasn't called CPI at the time. And Keystone needed a teacher. They called CPI. Do you know anybody? And they're like, hey, this guy has a pretty good resume. Give him a call. So we talked. Sam's trying to tell me how not to be worried about the interview, things like that. And I'm like, I have a great job. If I don't get your job, it's not a big deal. You don't need to coach me here. And long story short, went in for the interview. There were several people with schooling. Okay. I have no college experience at the time, but a lot of people, not a lot, I think 3 people had applied that already had some schooling under their belt. And somehow they chose me. I believe it was mostly dealt with the fact that I had coached 14 to 18-year-old boys in baseball for about 10 years. So kind of the disciplines and the way you train and run practices and things like that. I thought they apparently thought that related well to the classroom. So I came in, I mean, as I don't know, green behind the ears as you can get as far as the teacher goes.
Yeah, we're gonna come back to that, but I do want to take a couple steps backwards in case people are listening to this show and they're like, "What's a machinist? I don't even know what that means." How do you describe what a machinist is to somebody that has no idea?
Well, I think for me, somebody will hand you a blueprint of something they want manufactured. The microphone that you are using, the headphones that you're using, had to have some sort of a die in order to be stamped or pressure molded to, and a machinist would make those type of things. And I always found it very satisfying. Somebody hands you a blueprint. At the end of the day, you can hand them a usable part. Typically, it's in metal. My experience is metal, but it could be plastic. It could be graphite. It could be a lot of different types of material. But mine was primarily aluminum, steel, some stainless steel, typically.
So then you start this journey as an educator in, back in the day, we would call what you were doing or working at a votech, vocational technology, or yeah, I guess that's what it's, vocational votech. That's what it was when I was a kid. It has changed. Nowadays we're calling it CTC a lot of times, right? Career Technical Center or Career Technical Training. Is there another acronym out there that I'm not aware of, Shan, right now, or is that's the go-to?
It is typically either career and technical centers or career and technical education. Is typically what you're. We try to call it that. The vocational stuff is kind of antiquated, let's say, and maybe give the wrong impression to people.
Okay, and we're gonna come back to that because I want to ask you some deeper questions about that. But I have to ask you, so you walk in, you get this job, and you've done 30 years in industry or however long it was, and now all of a sudden you're in front of a classroom of teenagers, which yeah, okay, you've coached baseball, you had experience working with kids, but working with kids on a baseball field and having them in a classroom and you have a whole day and the structure that is a school and all that, was that a huge shock for you, or was that transition, did you find that transition easy or difficult? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh man, it was pretty much here's the key. Don't let anybody get destroyed in the process. Is pretty much how it went that first year. Um, Fortunately for me, my daughter was a teacher. So a weird fact would be she has more teaching experience than I have. So many times when it came to certain issues inside of my classroom, say a discipline issue of some sort, I would call her on the phone and say, hey, this is going on. How should I treat this? And she would give me some advice. She was a great help through that process. Uh, the ability to differentiate between the students is probably the hardest thing. You can't I walked in thinking everybody knew the decimal for 9/32, or everyone knew what the tat reel size was for a quarter 20. And then by the end of that, well, probably by the end of my first semester, I'm going, whoa, these young men and young ladies are square one. We have to get back and do some things. I have to train them in order to remember some of this stuff that typically I took for granted. So that was the hardest thing, was things that I took for granted. I thought they should know that the students did not know.
Well, looking back on it now, when you were in high school, were you in a VOTEC program for machining?
No, I was in the academic track. I wanted to. I lived in Orbiston. They had Williamsport Area Community College, which is now Penn College. You had the opportunity to go there. But I needed a ride from Orbiston to Lock Haven, which is about 20 miles, maybe 25 miles. I had to provide that transportation, had to catch the bus by 7 in the morning, and I had no way to do that. So when I came through the educational system in the 60s and 70s, they tracked kids to some degree. So we had a general track, we had a vocational track, we had a business track, and we had what they called an academic track or college prep. I was a college prep student.
You guys are fighting a stereotype that has been around for way too long. And, we can argue whether there's some accuracy to that stereotype or not. But, I mean, there is this stereotype. When I was growing up in the 1990s, in high school in the 90s, our VOTEC wasn't part of our school. It was our county had two VOTEC centers, and depending on which high school you went to, or what program you wanted to do, then you actually spent half your day in your home school, and then half the day you were at the VOTEC. And there was always this, there was the techies, and then there were the kids that stayed at school, and there was this divide among the student body. And then when I came to Keystone Central, we had our CTC, or we have our CTC actually part of the physical building that the high school is in. So we're not busing kids like my high school did, but a lot of our CTC shops are in the basement of the building. And you refer to those kids, and this sounds kind of bad from someone who's not involved or knows the system. I say, oh, the basement kids, the kids down in the basement. And there is still we're still fighting this stereotype that a kid that's enrolled in one of these programs, whether it's auto body or auto mechanics or machining or ag, that the stereotype I think for most people is these are, and I'll speak plainly, these are the kids that aren't good at school. These are the kids that aren't smart. These are the kids that aren't gonna go to college. They can't do that kind of stuff. And then we also fight the stereotype where we're living is that they're the term that's often thrown around. They're the hicks. They're the ones in the big boots and the live out in the mountains and all this stuff. And of course, there might be some small truth to some of those kids that fit that. But I mean, that's a stereotype that VOTEC, I think, right now in our country has to overcome. Because I'm sure that's the case in a lot of schools. It can't be just Keystone Central School District where you have that divide between the kids, going to college and the kids the kids that aren't going to college but aren't in VOTEC, and then the kids that are in VOTEC. And even myself, when I first came to KCSD, I had some preconceived notions about what a VOTEC kid was, and it was wrong. I didn't know the programs and what those kids were able to do. And I mean, having all these years under my belt, I know now that if someone says they're in the machining program or they're in our drafting program, those kids are doing high level thinking stuff. And it's not just the place where you dump the quote unquote dumb kids. Can you talk a little bit about that? And like from your perspective too, I've often thought about this. I never asked you this, Shan. You're down there in that basement. You had kids coming to you who probably bought into some of that stereotype as well. Did you ever have to like show these kids that you're not the dumb kid because you're down here in the basement? Did you ever have that as like that you had to deal with?
I don't think so much with the students, Doug, as it is the staff. Um, I think all career tech centers, not just Keystone, but all career tech centers, uh, their job is to educate the people that are in their system and in their community to what's going on. And yes, I have many kids out there. I have several kids out there, I should say, that I asked about taking my job when I decided I was retiring, uh, with no college over their head, One of them has completed an apprenticeship, and he told me, he's like, Packer, I'm going to make six figures this year. I'm not going to take your $40,000 a year job. And how I think that's the best way to respond to that. Some of these kids, they're on the apprenticeships, especially, they are making a life sustaining wage, getting their education, their apprenticeship free, and coming out and making tremendous amounts of money and not having to go to college. I also have students who I have several students who earn anywhere from 10 to 15 credits, college credits, before they graduate high school. And one of them got a $10,000 scholarship on top of it. So essentially, let's say if you've earned, say, 15 credits and you get a $10,000 scholarship on top of it, at least your first semester is going to be paid for, if not your first year. And it greatly increases their earning potential, lifetime earning potential, because they can graduate sooner, or they can take a higher level college class, have to take those entry level. And I have, I guess this is the difference between myself, or what I think, and I could be wrong with this, and a lot of the students who are going to struggle in college, and they're going to come out of my shop and just be an operator, and maybe not get an apprenticeship. And those students can also make a life sustaining wage in the machining world just by being an operator, maybe not a setup guy. So it is the differentiation that I see inside of my classroom it's hard to describe. It is really, really hard to describe.
Well, I think also another battle that you guys and your colleagues are fighting in that sense is I'm a product of a generation where the big push was everybody goes to college and you're not successful if you don't. And for a whole generation, that was the push. You're familiar with that concept, of course. Anybody that's my age is also familiar with it, and that was such a myopic outlook from our society that we took a whole generation and said, if you're involved in a trade, that's a job that's not going to get you anywhere. You have to have that college degree. And now we're suffering as a country because we have a shortage of all of these trades. We have, try finding a plumber, try finding an electrician, try finding a good carpenter. Because we went through a whole generation where we said there's no value in this. But the end of the day, people need their toilets fixed. People need electric, have electric in their house. And I think and that you can definitely, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say within the last couple years, we as a society, we as a country have, like, that light bulb went off, like, oh crap, hey, like, we need people to do these jobs and they're not trained, they're not out there. We got to make them, we got to make new people. And because of that, maybe because of the market and all that, these jobs now pay better, way better than most entry level jobs coming out there with a college degree. So, I mean, do you think that's a huge, like, something that is another major hurdle that VOTEC and CTC programs have to overcome?
I think one of the problems I see, and I can't speak to the exact statistic, but I would have to think 50% of the people who go to college change their major in the first year. And then of that 50% that stayed in their major, when they get their 4-year degree, probably half of them can't get a job in whatever they're majoring in. And now all of a sudden they have 40, 50, 60, maybe $100,000 bill over their head and can't get a job in whatever they're in. The other thing I see is some students just aren't mature enough to be in school at age 18. They need a year or two to grow. And I'll use my son as an example. He graduated high school, went to a college. He didn't fail or anything like that, but it got to the point where, hey, I don't think this computer programming course is for me. And he switched a major. And then at the end of that year, he's like, yeah, this isn't for me. And he was out, and he had a full year of college over his head to pay for. So he's behind the eight ball. Somewhere around age 27, I guess it was, he came home. He says, hey, I need to go get a 4-year degree, and put his nose to the grindstone, was on the dean's list. I was actually working for a company that paid a portion of his college. he's able to work full time, got a portion of his college paid, got his 4-year degree, and he's now an engineer. But it took him to that age 26, 27 to go, this is where I'm going to be the rest of my life. And he now has a great job. His college bill is actually paid for. Um, so I think that's the gamut. Some, my daughter knew in grade six, I'm going to be a teacher, and graduated and went to college and boom, right through and came out and done that. It's hard, I think, for an 18-year-old to make a good decision. I get into teaching when I was 50, and just to let your audience know, college is always going to be there. I was 50 years old when I took my very first college class, and it was at Penn State's main campus. And it's pretty daunting as a 15-year-old to go in and share a classroom with 18 to 20-year-old students. So the college route is always there. There are different ways for that lifelong learning to take place, and it doesn't have to be at age 18, the year you graduate high school. You don't have to be in college. And I'm not knocking college. I've taught, been fortunate to teach at a local college. So it's not like I'm bashing colleges or anything like that. It's just, I think somehow we have to allow our young people to make better decisions upon graduation from high school, give them more opportunities.
From your perspective, how do we do that? What would, if you had, like, unlimited funding or whatever? What from your perspective, what might be some? How could we do that? And maybe also, how could we do a better job as they're going through those last 2 or 3 years of high school?
Well, I think I retired from machining as a machining instructor about 2 years ago. And currently for Keystone, I'm an adult ed and apprentice coordinator. Along with that, we've created a pre-apprentice program for our machining students. We've just made an application to the state for an industrial manufacturing technician pre-apprentice program to the state. And I believe we're going to be moving towards a healthcare pre-apprentice program, which should help our students. So like they should be able to, for instance, my machining students are able to graduate in the apprentice program that they are aligned to as a 3-year program. And students who finish the machining program, a pre-apprentice program, can get 1 year of that forgiven. So now they're 1 year faster up that chain. So I think as we create opportunities within the career and technical centers, we have Penn College now, which allows us students to get 10, 15 credits. We have the LHU program. We have a lot of opportunities. I think it's up to the schools to be able to advertise those and get that word out to those students and the staff too. I know you and I and let's call it the Breakfast Club have talked several times. Like, I didn't know we did that, and so some of that's on me as the adult ed coordinator to make sure the staff understands what the opportunities are for their students. And obviously for guidance, I think needs to have a greater understanding of the opportunities. One of the exercises I used to do with my machining class was we go to the library and we had to look up 3 colleges and what's the admission procedure, who do you contact, how much is it going to cost, and things like that. And I learned a lot because my students would learn, they just pick whatever college they want. And several colleges, like the one flabbergasted me, is called Iowa Hawkeye Community College, where the students can go, they'll get like an $800 stipend for food and their dorm, and then they obviously have a bill over their head. But the students who graduate from, let's say, a CNC machinist program there, they're guaranteed a job for $40,000 a year at John Deere or places like that. And then after 3 years, their college bill is paid for. And I've had several, like the librarian one year is like, what do you mean your students can get their college paid for free? I'm like, yeah, they can if they do the research and that's a school they want to go to. And she's like, well, how do all of our students learn that? And that's where our dilemma is as instructors, you and I, and our guidance counselors and administrators. We have to be able to convey that message to the young people.
Yeah, and it's tough because there's so much out there. And the other thing I wanted my audience to know, and I never knew this, and I only got to know it through our friendship, is that I want people to know that at least here in Pennsylvania, I can't speak for any other state, but it seems to me like in the last couple years, the state is really investing in CTC programs. Can you talk a
You are
little bit about
correct.
that?
Yes, the last administration and the current administration have really pushed for apprentice and pre-apprentice money. The pre-apprentice money. I guess let me describe what our apprenticeship is. Keystone is the holder. Let's say we take care of all the paperwork of a CNC operator setup programmer apprenticeship program, and we are in a consortium of other schools. So we call it the CPAC, Central Pennsylvania Apprenticeship Consortium. Sun's with us, Sun Air Vocational, Williamsport, Jersey Shore, Columbia Montour, CPI, and Keystone. So there's 6 schools involved with it. When we set this up, we were able to chase what's called a PA Smart Grant. We got $250,000. Of that $250,000, Keystone Central pulled in, I want to say roughly a third of that, probably $70,000, $80,000. We bought new machines, we bought updated CAD CAM software, we bought some curriculum, so things like that, and it enabled us to enhance the current program. And all 6 schools got that money. We're working with a grant right now to they just came and filmed at Keystone Central, but they're going to all the schools and doing a promotional video that we should be able to send out. And hey, this is pretty catchy. Check this place out. We're chasing another grant right now. So the current administration has been really the last one and the current Pennsylvania administration have really pushed for this apprenticeship style of learning, and they're willing to give money to back it up.
Yeah, and I think a lot of taxpayers also don't know that for every child that is enrolled in a CTC program, the state government gives money to the school district to help educate that child in those programs. Is that do I have that right?
I think so, and I'm not an administrator, so I can't speak 100% to it, but I believe whether you're academic or career in tech, you're going to get a reimbursement from the state for every child in the chair. A full-time career and technical student, if I understand it correctly, gets an additional stipend. So there is some money there to help career and tech programs. There's also the Perkins funding, the Perkins Act. Boy, I'm not sure what year that came out. It's been quite a while ago, but that helps too. There are certain hoops you have to jump through. I've been fortunate to take part in what's called approved program evaluations for career tech centers across the state. I've been as far away as Bradford and as far south as Sun, I think it is. So with that money, like if you're going to take money from the state or federal government, there are certain things you had that they're going to want you to meet. And so, again, I've been fortunate enough to be able to sit in on 6 evaluations of other programs across the state. Say, hey, your paperwork isn't quite right here, not quite right there, things like that, which has also helped. I think the Keystone Central program, because now I can come back and say, hey, Bradford has this really cool agriculture program. I was at Clearfield and they do a non-traditional calendar, which is awesome, where they're showing non-traditional students throughout your career technical center. They actually have a female welder on staff as an instructor. So I'm able to come back to Keystone and say, hey, these are things we might want to think about to enhance our program.
I think the other thing I'm noticing too, I'm kind of glad you said that about a female welder, is that I'm noticing, and correct me if I'm wrong, at least from my perspective, more and more girls are enrolling in what were traditionally, the dirty programs, the ones that was the boys, what the boys took. So auto mechanics or machining or ag. Is that just me or is that real? Because it seems to me that that's the case.
It is real. It's not where it needs to be, though. We're not anyways near what the state would want that standard to be. And it's tough, especially well, I hate to call it that, the dirty trades, but I've referred to it to some degree as the dirty trades too. You got oil, changing oil, or you're making ships, or you're doing whatever, maintaining a piece of equipment, or sawing boards, whatever it happens to be. It kind of is. You have to sweep when you're done. Let's put it that way. So dirty trades doesn't make, it's like Mike Rowe's dirty jobs type thing. It still doesn't quite ring true. But yeah, traditionally those jobs or those classes are filled with, let's say, boys, where the health occupations program might have a higher level of non-traditional students. Well, they're actually, I believe health occupations has changed. They no longer call boys non-traditional in that program, but a health oc program is going to have more boys in it than my machining class would have girls in it. The percentage is going to be greater. So I think we need to do a better job of promoting that, and how that gets done, I don't know, because it's I've been at Keystone now 17 years, and I really don't see, you see improvements one year and the next year it's gone.
Right. Well, you already answered my next question. I was going to say, what aren't we doing well when it comes to CTC education? And I mean, you mentioned, getting the word out, just getting people to understand, educating people. Like, what do these programs do? What can they do for you as a student? And I agree with you. I think that is a huge hurdle that probably all programs across the country probably are dealing with. But to close this portion of the conversation out, what would you say we, and I, not Keystone, but I like as a field, what is CTC doing right or doing well?
Wow. We're all going to toot our own horn to some degree, right, Doug? I believe career and technical education has it correct. Okay. I believe, uh, well, and I guess I want to word this carefully. I believe the career and tech needs to do a better job interfacing with our academic people. For instance, my students are doing college level math. I mean, they're doing right triangle trig, they're doing physics, they're all that is inside of my particular discipline. One of the things I used to do, I would send my students on a scavenger hunt. When we started working with right triangles, a scavenger hunt, go to your teacher and ask why this formula works. And then they had to go to the principal and have a principal sign it, just to make sure that my colleagues, my academic colleagues, understood the kind of math that's going on in the basement in a dirty trade. Um, I think the interface, I think sometimes the academic world are giving them math that they may not use, okay, in the future. I'm not saying that they might use it if they go to college, but probably, let's say 50% of the students graduating Keystone Central probably don't need calculus, let's say, where I think we almost need a vocational driven math. Same with reading and writing. I've had several conversations with colleagues. Hey, Johnny isn't doing his work in English, and I'll walk down to walk into my office and open up a drawer and pull out Johnny's file and go, oh, he's not doing this. And there's a paragraph written there, and there's 5 vocabulary words, and there's, hey, what did this mean, and things like that. And they're going, how do you get the students to do that? And I would tell them, like, Shakespeare it's important. I'm not saying don't expose a student to Shakespeare, but if the goal is to have a student read and write, every once in a while, let them read and write about something they want to read and write about. And excuse me, it was one of the things that I didn't realize at the time. One of my English teachers in high school, I had a book report due every Friday, and I'm writing Sergeant Fury comic books and Stan Lee Marvel, and I'm thinking I'm pulling the wool over her eyes. Well, now 50 years later, when I started teaching, I'm like, oh, she made me read and write, and I didn't fight it because I was doing. And so I kind of took that attitude inside of my classroom. And I think sometimes, again, our academic world, let's say English, for example, my students are technical reading and technical writing. Sometimes we have to expose them to that in the academic world. It can't always be, the Shakespeare and what did this guy mean and things of that nature. Sometimes we have to let them pull up a technical manual and actually write about that. You know,
No, I agree with you 100%. And the system, both systems, I think, could use some serious overhaul in that sense. And that's a discussion maybe for for
yeah.
another episode for sure.
I've actually invited every time I would send an email out to the entire mathematics staff. When you're doing right triangles, let me know, and I will create a lesson downstairs that your students can come watch. You know how it applies in the real physical world. I would been known to go sit in Mr. Kramer's math class just to sit there, and the kids would look at me like, "What the heck's he doing here?" But and one day he was doing radiance, and he said, "Can you use this downstairs?" And I was able to apply it to something we do downstairs, and or I'll walk by a math class and just put a formula on the board and say, "Hey, why does this work?" and not even tell them who put it there. So I try my best at it, but I think there's just a bit of a disconnect there, and I think from a colleague standpoint, an academic higher up administrative standpoint, we have to make that connection.
All right, Shan. Where do you see the future of Votech going in the next, well, CTC, in the next 5, 10 years? What do you think?
I think with the way the administrations have backed this, both federally and from a state level, I mean, the sky's the limit. It just continues to be enhanced. Again, I have students who leave my program and go to 4-year colleges. I have students leave my program to get a 2-year degree. I get students go get a certificate somewhere. I get students to just graduate and make a sustained living right out of the chute. So I think the sky's the limit here for career and technical education. And again, when you look at the funding that Keystone has had coming in over the last, I don't know, 5 years, I guess, the equipment upgrades is just phenomenal. Dude. I mean, you walk into the automotive shop and all you see are just fancy lights and stuff going on all the time. And it's been a blessing, the past 5 years.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the push is going to be there for growth to continue and also investment. I don't see why. I mean, they'd be a fool not to continue because, like, I think, like I said earlier, we need those people. We need those jobs filled, and those jobs are going to continue to be filled, or will continue to need to be filled moving forward. So, I mean, I've always been impressed, Shan. When you were still working with us, I'd like to go downstairs, and I didn't always get the opportunity because of schedules and stuff. But I love to go down in the basement and walk through some of those classes because you saw kids that, when they weren't down there, they were trouble kids a lot of times. They were the ones getting in trouble because they were having to sit and read Shakespeare or write about something that they didn't want to write about. But then I'd walk down into your classroom and that same kid was over a machine doing crazy stuff, crazy good stuff that just blew me away. I agree. I hope that anyone listening out there that has either works for a school or has any connection with their local school district that has a CTC program or a VOTech program, learn a little bit more about what they have. You will be amazed at what
I've
these
had
kids are
several
doing.
administrators, one administrator in particular would come into my classroom and I'm like, did I do something wrong? Because they'd be there for like 40 minutes. And I'm like, okay, did I do so? The first couple of times it happened, I'm like, hey, what's up? And the response was, I needed to get away, not a career and technical director, an academic principal now. And they would come to my classroom and go, I needed to walk in because I know your students are engaged. I know if I walk up to one of your students and ask them what they're doing, they're going to explain it to me. So it was pretty refreshing when you see an actual academic principal walk into your program and go, students were engaged in learning.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's true. I mean, I saw it firsthand when I used to come into your classroom too. So I applaud you, Shan, for being able to do what you did because you did it really well. But I'm using the past tense because 2 years ago, Shan decided I'm done, I'm retiring, and I just want to ask you one quick question: how's retirement?
Uh, it's been great. I call it fake retirement. I have a part-time job at Keystone Central. I was fortunate to teach both the spring and fall semester in 2022 at Penn College. I teach an apprenticeship class once in a while. I do some work for PDE, but I have the opportunity to know anytime I want. So if I have something going on, kids are doing something, or if I just want degrees, I know know with you guys, we have about to retire, and I told him it's October decisions are really tough. And I said, because it's 60 degrees out and you don't know whether to get your bow out, you don't know whether to get your fishing rod out, you don't know whether to ride a motorcycle, you don't know whether to mow grass. The decisions you have to make when you're retired are overwhelming, and just uh, so I'm enjoying it. Let's say. And my wife is about to retire. She'll retire Friday of next week, so we'll both be at home. So
Oh man, living the dream there, Shan. Living the dream.
yeah,
Well, Shan,
I
go ahead.
I recommend getting into it as early as you can, because you know when you're into it, you're on the shorter side of life, let's say.
Right.
So get into it early, Doug.
I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try my best. Well, Shan, we close every episode out the same way with 10 quick questions to all of my guests. Are you ready for your 10 questions?
I'll give it a go.
Yeah,
We'll see how this
you're
goes
gonna do
here.
fine. You're gonna do fine. All right, question number one. What is your morning drink of choice?
Currently, let's say I have two. I drink a full bottle of water before I go swim in the morning, and then from there it's black coffee.
Black coffee.
And can I tell you a quick story about black coffee?
Yeah, sure.
I was fortunate to be a charter member of what's called the Penn State Professional Academy, and we learned a lot about how to make presentations and speak to people and things like that. So this is early on in my educational career, and this one young lady, a beautiful presentation, and she had a coffee there, and she put sugar in it and said, "Look at your lesson now," and then she put milk in it and said, "Look at your lesson now," and it had creamer and foam and all kinds of stuff, and I kind of raised my hand, and I'm like, and what happens if black coffee gets the job done? And I don't like that stuff. And I actually had to go apologize to her, because it was a great lesson, and sometimes you do have to enhance them, but I am that guy. I've been known as the black coffee guy from all my Penn State colleagues.
That's a good
You
one.
know,
All right. Number two, who is a go-to musical artist or group for you?
oh man, I'm 66, and there have been some great bands out there, but probably my the go-to band would have to be the Eagles. Their message is clear. They're it doesn't matter if you listen to a studio album or listen to a live album, they sound the same. They're really great musicians, and harmonies are good. I think they could sing without music and sound great.
I agree. Eagles are a great band. Absolutely. All right. Number three, what is a movie that you can watch over and over again and it never gets old?
Well, the one I have on my DVR is High Noon with Gary Cooper.
That is a great film. Oh,
It's
it is such a good film.
it talks about the struggle, the marriage struggle, and a lifelong struggle, and how you overcome it. It's an awesome movie.
Yeah, it really is. All right. Number four, what's the last thing that you read?
Oh man, my reading still is a lot of technical jargon, since I'm still active in education. Let's say the last book I read cover to cover. Usually, when I'm out on an archery stand, I'll take a book with me, but so I'm not moving around. But the last book cover to cover was called "Tell Me I Can't," the Jamie Moyer story. He pitched for the Phillies, but I think from age 30 on, he won more games from 30 on than he did when he was 20 to 30. He had some arm issues. Was told, "Hey, you're not going to be good enough. You can't throw hard enough." Da 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 da, all that kind of stuff, and he's able to prove everybody wrong.
Yeah, that's a good one. I
And
wasn't familiar with that.
I'm not a Philly fan either,
Well,
but
we'll work on
it is a good book to read.
we'll work on that, Shan. We'll work on that. Number five, what's your favorite pizza topping?
Oh, I'm a pepperoni guy.
Okay, all right. Number six, laying on the beach or going for a hike?
Going for a hike. I got to admit, this retirement gig's pretty good. It'll be 30 degrees outside. I'm going, yeah, I'm heading to game lands. Just take
Yeah,
off.
sure. That's awesome. Number seven. Oh, that's what I'm interested in hearing. You have invited me over for dinner. What are you making?
Well,
Because
this is an in.
I know you like to cook, so I'm interested
Well,
now.
I do cook, but I'm not making peanut butter ice cream. That's an inside joke.
Yeah, no peanut butter ice cream.
He's been to
Good.
my house before and said I hate peanut butter ice cream. So, no, typically you would, if you've ever watched Blue Bloods or the Waltons, our Sunday meals are meat, potatoes, vegetable, dessert. uh, and a large table. But my kids come home. Sometimes my wife's family will be there. So it'd be conversation. It would be meat, potatoes, uh, that type of thing. The old homegrown
Yeah.
type of meal is what if you were getting a meal, that's what you're going to get.
Well, that's what I grew up on. So hey, as long as if there's gravy on the table, you know it's going to be a good meal,
Oh,
right?
my wife cooks gravy. Yes.
Awesome. All right, number 8. What is a dream vacation destination for you?
Man, I don't know if I call this a dream vacation. My bucket list would be to trace my father's steps through Europe. He was in World War II, the Ninth Infantry, landed in Normandy, and for 2.5 years went right through France, Europe, Germany. Been wounded a couple of times. Once at St. Lo, and once when they broke through the Siegfried lines. His unit was the first to break through there. He got shot there. It'd be kind of I think it'd be kind of cool to stand on that hallowed ground and maybe have a better understanding about what made my father tick. Because when let's just say he turned to alcohol as his crutch when he came home from that conflict, and all of the problems that come with alcohol came with that as well. For instance, and I was 5 when this happened. My brother was 15 when he left home. So when I look at the relationship you and your brother have, you need to treasure that, because I never got that with my brother. When he left home, he never came home. So um, it's just kind of weird, but it would be nice to have a better understanding of what that looked like and stand on that hallowed ground.
Yeah, having been in some of those places and some of the American cemeteries, it does it opens your eyes, of course, and gives you a better perspective. But it also it's humbling to be in those places, and for you having that direct connection. Wow, yeah. I hope that can come true for you someday, Shan. I really do. I really do. All right, number 9. What is something you're afraid of?
Snakes. As much as
You're
I'm out in the
I
woods,
was gonna say you're in the woods all the time.
I
Okay.
get I get into an archery stand not long ago, and sure enough, there's garter snakes in my ground blind, and I'm like, what the heck?
Well, I'm not a snake fan either. I'm with you on that one. All right, last question. You've had a couple different jobs in your life, so this will be an interesting question for you. What job, other than one that you've had, would you love to have?
I think I'd like to continue in some fashion what I'm doing now. A dream job would be to be able to consult. I think my background as a machinist and an educator, the education that Penn State gave me as I earned my level 2 instructional, uh, my ability to, my opportunity, let's say, to work with the APE reviews with PDE, and the apprentice and pre-apprentice that Kurt Lynch and I have both been working on heavily. I think that would allow me to go to another career tech center and say, look, these are things that have worked for my classroom and my career tech center. I think you might want to take a look at this, and maybe it'll work for you. So some type of consulting in that form. I think if money were no object, I'd probably be doing something like that.
Yeah, and you'd be good at it. I know you would, Shan. Well, Shan, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy retired schedule to talk with me for a little bit. I miss talking to you every day. We used to talk every morning, and I miss that. But I know you're having a good time doing what you're doing, and I do see you from time to time, so that's good. But we definitely will have to get together here in the near future and sit on the real front porch or back porch or whatever. And you bring your guitar, and we'll play a little bit. We'll play a little bit of music. How's that sound?
Yeah, you have to teach me some
You
chords. I've been
well,
15 minutes a day. I've been doing now, learning
that's
strumming techniques and things like that.
will
15 minutes, put it away, and then
yeah.
back again.
Well, that's better than nothing at all. So, yeah, bring the guitar over and we'll have some fun.
All right, thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Shan. Take care.
See you.
Thank you for listening to Doug's Front Porch, a conversational podcast with your host, Doug Maidenford. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. 5 stars only, please. Follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just look for Doug's Front Porch. Also, please feel free to tell all of your friends about the show, and I'll see you all next time on my front porch.